Don't be quiet, O God. Look what an uproar your enemies are making. Your foes have reared their ugly heads. They cunningly plot against your people and conspire against those you cherish. They say, "Come, let's destroy them as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more." Ancient words from our tradition for our present day understanding.
One of the questions you may get asked, I get asked a lot, is how do we care about the world without burning out? How do we not just get exhausted and step back from it? And I think for people of faith, the activism comes from the spiritual side of things. When I was a kid, I had no idea what I was doing, but I fell in love with Gandhi and Schweitzer and Helen Keller and Martin Luther King and these kinds of people that I thought were just really nice people. I didn't realize they were all troublemakers. That to a person, they were socialists, a lot of more anarchists. And their idea of love spilled out into the real world and real people. So in a way, it's not my fault. I blame society for making it. We're looking at a series on prayer, and we're trying to look at all aspects of that with the understanding that for each person in this room, it's something different. For some of you, would never think of it being something religious. You meditate, or you contemplate, or you have some kind of practice that takes you deep in your heart. And I think that is a very important method of getting through this time. To have a place of peace inside of you where you don't just fall into the anger and become the reflection of what we all struggle with trying to protect people. So today we're looking at an aspect of prayer that traditional religion doesn't deal much with. It's called the dark night of the soul. Now, in traditional religion, this is seen as a kind of chug hole. And the idea is they try to just push through it, keep going, keep doing the same thing. And for some people, it's that kind of sense that you're on the telephone and there's nobody else on the other line. And in traditional religion, you just have to fake it till you make it kind of thing. But in mystical religion, this is seen as the stepping stone to a new way of spirituality. It's not seen as a failure. It's seen as a transition time, a time of transformation. When we look at the scripture and symbols and that kind of thing, if we're taught to take it literally, like many of us were, it really isn't very helpful after a certain point in your life. Invisible people, stories of miracles and this kind of thing. Initially, that can be very inspiring, but at some point, it just doesn't look like your world. And what I believe is that every symbol, it's like an aspirin. If it doesn't dissolve, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. Like the stories dissolve into your real life, and that's where they do their work. An image like being born again doesn't mean like joining the Christian church. It means leaving your small idea of who you are, dying to that, and being born into a larger idea where you're a cell in the common body. Life. It's a death and a rebirth. Symbol of resurrection is about that. But the point in mystical religion is to love. But to love in a radical way, in a universal way. Not just liking other people, but being transformed into their service. Being transformed in a way that heals the world and makes it better. So love is a wonderful religion, but it's also the most expensive religion. Think of what you have to give up to be a loving agent in the world, particularly these days. At a time when women are stepping forward and talking about the abuse that they suffer, so many male voices are speaking even louder to shut it down. I don't know if you heard Ben Carson this week. He blamed the Me Too movement on socialism. Right, when women say they've been assaulted, it's really a tool of socialism. Now, that's somebody who's so used to lying that he can talk about another person's experience without ever feeling any duty to test it out. And that is the leadership of the country. So used to lying that people's cry for justice can be dismissed. And it's not just the leadership of the church. People of privilege have got to learn to deconstruct our ideas of who we are as white, as Christian, as male, and become agents for a better world. We have to die and be reborn. You may not call it prayer, but there's inner work to be done that is very radical. The deeper you go inside yourself, the more you feel things like fear and desire. And you realize that the roots of the cruelty, you're not a cruel person, but you're frightened. The people we see tearing the world apart are not evil people, but they're afraid. The world has changed and they don't know how to cope with it. And their identity is linked to a sense of dominance over other people. It's linked to a sense of their possessions. And the idea of dividing things up in a way that would be fair for everybody terrifies them and numbs them in that terror. So whatever your practice of prayer, it needs to mean to stop running away from what we fear, because we all need to be transformed at this time. To stop running from what we're afraid of and go into our fear and sit with it. To stop chasing after trophies that we don't really want, that feel completely empty when we get them. And we need to sit with that desire and see what we're really longing for. We're talking about a transformation. And The Dark Night of the Soul is a short little poem that was written in the Middle Ages. And it's been retranslated over and over again. Little short, let me read a bit of it. The idea is, when you come time for radical growth that doesn't feel good, all of your bearings don't work anymore. And you have to go into that confusion and into that darkness. And traditional religion does not prepare you for that. When you're holding on to your idea of who God is or what righteousness is, and you can't let go of it, then that also means you can't be transformed. And so this ancient prayer talks about going into a place of darkness. It says, "O night that guided me, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that joined beloved with lover, lover transformed into the beloved." I was very lucky to run across Thomas Merton when I was in college, and also other religions that talk about Christianity in a way that makes a whole lot more sense. I want to share, this is from a Hindu interpreter of this Christian prayer. He says, in this dark night of the soul, it is the stage when the ego deeply realizes that all its struggles to build identity, meaning, and self-worth are useless. And we understand that the elements of reality that bring us value and comfort are impermanent. We know that all the structures that serve as our inner foundations are an illusion. We realize that we are living inside of the matrix, and this realization is terrifying. And this is Merton's interpretation of it. The more you try to avoid suffering, the more you suffer. Because smaller and more insignificant things begin to torture you in proportion to your fear of being hurt. The one who does the most to avoid suffering is, in the end, the one who suffers most. That's talking about emotional pain, not physical abuse. What we're being asked to do in the spiritual life is to say yes to transformation. And transformation is what terrifies us. Change is what terrifies us. In other words, life is what terrifies us. And unfortunately, religion teaches us to think of life as something we can control and hold on to. And sees prayer as a kind of magical begging God to give us what makes us feel safe. What prayer can be, or meditation or contemplation or inner work, what it can be is a place where we offer our hearts for transformation on behalf of the world. It doesn't do any good to struggle for justice if we carry hatred in our hearts. If we carry fear and greed in our hearts. We'll just replace one bully with another. Now, I like our bullies, but the world's not going to get better regardless of which bully wins. Listen to this. This is Thomas Merton again. And this is someone who's an activist. He's a mystic, but he's an activist. He is protesting war, but he's talking out to your heart. He says, instead of hating the people who you think are war makers, hate the appetites and disorders in your own soul, which are the causes of war. If you love peace, then hate injustice, hate tyranny, hate greed, but hate these things in yourself, not in another. When men shut down women's call for justice. When white people shut down people of color's call for justice. When straight people shut down LGBTQ people's call for justice. When Christians are willing to step aside while Muslims and Jewish people and atheists are mistreated. We've not gone through the transformation. We have to die to that identity that separates us from others, that makes us better than others. That has to die if we're going to have a better world. So prayer, rather being this charming thing that you make posters about, is the crematorium of the ego. Doesn't sound very pleasant, does it? It's sort of like Mr. Potato Head. If I may get philosophical here. If Mr. Potato Head's going to figure out who he is, he's going to have to lose the ears, the hat, the nose, the mustache. Because none of that stuff is who it is. Do you know you're not your religion? Do you know you're not your possessions? Do you know you're not your gender? Do you know you're not your country? See, it's saying no to those things that allows us to say yes to life. Because life is change and life terrifies us. In the West, they call it being born again, which, think of how sloppy that was the first time. I don't know if you remember your birth, but most unpleasant. And the second one's not better. Or the third, the fourth from then on. In the East, instead of using that symbol, they use the symbol of reincarnation. And if you take any religious belief literally, it'll be a joke, right? So reincarnation, believed literally, is just as silly as, the heaven and hell thing. But listen, this is Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist priest. This is who Martin Luther King nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He says, he's talking about reincarnation here, but he's really talking about life and evolution. We cannot conceive of the birth of anything. There is only continuation. I know that in the past I've been a cloud, a river, and the air. And I was a rock. I was the minerals and the water. This is not a question of belief in reincarnation. This is the history of life on earth. We have been gas, sunshine, water, fungi, and plants. We have been single-cell beings. The Buddha said that in one of his former lives, he was a tree. He was a fish. He was a deer. These are not superstitious things. Every one of us has been a cloud, a deer, a bird, a fish, and we continue to be these things, not just in former lives. What the mystics tell us is there will come a time when your idea of God, what you've been taught as the forms of religion, will come in the way of the growth that your spirit needs to go through. It will feel like the dark night of the soul. It will actually be a birth. In traditional religion, you panic and you just try to do the same thing better. But in mystical religion, you recognize that the times that make you unhappy also make you wise. At least they often can. This is Thomas Merton again, and I know I'm doing a whole lot of quotes, but I'm hoping it'll make it easier to understand. Merton says the most crucial aspect of this experience of the dark night of the soul is precisely the temptation to doubt God. We must not minimize the fact that this is a genuine risk. For here we are advancing beyond the stages where God is made accessible in our minds by simple and primitive images. We are entering the night in which God is present without any image, invisible, inscrutable, and beyond any satisfactory mental representation. The early church talked this way all the time. That's why they were accused of being atheists. They didn't let their image of God block out their experience of the sacred. This is Gregory of Nyssa. He says, concepts create idols. Only wonder comprehends anything. People kill one another over idols. Wonder makes us fall to our knees. And this is John Scotus. We do not know what God is. Even God cannot say what God is, because God is not anything. Literally, God is not, because God transcends being. Now, that's not comfortable, but you recognize what he's saying, right? As long as you're trying to make God into an object that makes you feel comfortable, you've stepped out of life and out of the transformation. So the symbol takes you to the mystery, to the threshold of that. The starting place is always the part of our lives that we're running away from. The fear, the greed, the desire, the sadness, the grief. The part that we don't want to look at is where the treasure is always hidden. It's like when you go into a dark room from the outside. First, the room looks completely empty. When you let your vision settle, you see chairs and tables. It's the same way with your heart. When you go deeply and profoundly, deeper into your perception, at first it looks completely empty and you're uncomfortable and you just want to get the hell out of there. Pardon my French. When you make your home there, you found a foundation that isn't shaken by change. It's a treasure you can keep. Fear may be the first word in the dark night of the soul, but the last word is joy, peace, love. It's like when you learn to swim. Do you remember the terror of learning to swim? Trying to hold on to something solid? It's when we give ourselves to life and we stop trying to clutch it and control it and make it permanent that we find the peace that we're longing for. I'll close with, I mentioned the Hindu commentary. This is the ending of this Dark Night of the Soul. It's a very strange ending, and I ended the first service with it, and I could tell, nope, this isn't going to work. So the next to the last thing. See if this works. Get the drum roll ready in case it... O night that guided me, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that joined beloved with lover, lover transformed in the beloved. I remained lost in oblivion, my face I reclined on the beloved. All ceased and I abandoned myself, leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies. Not a great ending for a sermon. But you get the point. It starts off feeling like it's negative and loss. What you're getting is everything. I'll finish with the Hindu commentary. The first glimpses of this secret sky, vastness, nothingness, void, seem so scary, and yet is the source of everything we have ever considered worthy in life. Everything that has ever given meaning to human existence. Every true value, every perception of authenticity, love, and beauty. And here we are, scared of what we are. Somehow we forget our true nature, but deep inside, we feel that our task is to find the way home. And if you'll hit the drum roll, I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.